If you are absolutely obsessed with a battle series featuring a massive squad of ridiculously buff dudes flexing their insane muscles, where the combat mechanics feel completely broken and totally unreal, then Baki is the perfect bloody masterpiece crafted just for you. The Japanese fighters are insanely overpowered, while the American forces, despite their massive military buffs, are constantly getting completely nerfed. They are treated like absolute trash, which brings us to our main character Baki, a kid literally born from a monstrous bloodline. Since he was 13 years old, he endured a hellish training grind to follow his old man, fueled by his ultimate desire to utterly destroy him in battle, because this family dynamic is completely shattered, and today we dive into the crazy facts about his incredible journey, so welcome back to another highly anticipated rapid breakdown. Starting with the absolute basics of his profile, his real name is Baki Hanma, starting at age 13 and currently 18, standing 1.68 meters tall, weighing 76 kilograms, he is from Japan with brown hair and dark eyes, covered in brutal battle scars. Working as a student and a freelance fighter, his combat style is pure mixed martial arts, meaning he aggressively uses whatever technique fits the moment. And his status is currently alive, because killing the main character is bad for the plot. 2. His ultimate goal is to completely crush his father Yujiro. Yujiro Hanma is widely known as the absolute strongest creature currently alive. Baki does not actually dream of taking his exact place. He does not want to become the strongest in the entire world. He simply wants to be powerful enough to physically break him. This intense motivation was born because his mother constantly compared his power levels to his ridiculously overpowered father right from the start. He wanted to defeat him just to capture his mother's attention. This dark objective became completely canon and brutally clear later on, when he vowed to avenge his beloved mother Emi Akazawa, who was mercilessly crushed to death by Yujiro. 3. A local street gang of exactly 100 massive thugs was fully hired to absolutely obliterate Baki. 100 armed enemies rushed in. They attacked the young boy without a single drop of mercy. When the brutal chaotic clash finally ended, Baki felt deeply disappointed, because he only managed to utterly destroy 37 guys instead of completely wiping out the entire squad. For right here, Baki is naturally a carefree and relaxed kid who trains incredibly hard. He deeply loves and highly respects his incredibly close friends, but when it comes down to real conflicts, he transforms into an absolute battle freak. 5. He literally never stops training, day and night. He desperately pushes to level up all of his combat skills as incredibly fast as humanly possible. Being a fighter, since he is already a highly renowned warrior, he has a major tendency to recklessly dive into violent street brawls completely non-stop, through pure bad luck and endless fighting. He slowly realized that the absolute fastest and most efficient way to massively scale his power is to fiercely clash against opponents who have significantly higher stats than him. Enduring all of those terrifying near-death experiences is exactly why his entire physical body is completely covered in brutal scars today. 6. The vast majority of his time, even while sleeping, is entirely dedicated to extreme physical conditioning or intense mental combat. You might honestly wonder when this absolute madman actually gets to rest. He literally sleeps straight through his boring classes at school. I bet a lot of you watching this right now would love that lifestyle, but you honestly need to be totally overpowered like Baki to sleep that openly. Otherwise you will just be terrified while desperately napping. You would probably have a terrifying nightmare and completely crash onto the classroom floor while the teacher is speaking. 7. Now, in the Hanma Baki series, he strongly believed that the only legitimate way to break his limits was to challenge the absolute strongest man in the entirety of America, Biscuit Oliva, but meeting him is not exactly simple, mate. That completely broken monster is currently the head warden of a massively heavily guarded maximum security prison. The most basic and direct way to reach him was to literally get thrown into jail. To pull off this crazy strategy, Baki recklessly decided to casually kidnap the President of the United States straight from under heavy security, and then forcefully demanded the President to personally lock him up inside the Arizona State Prison. That is a completely legendary move right there. He is incredibly lucky that his entire body did not get blasted into a beehive before even reaching his targeted prison. Honestly speaking, if I were the President, I would have immediately ordered my guards to blast this disrespectful kid to pieces. 8. Coming up, Baki genuinely possesses an absolute god-tier lineage. His grandfather wiped out 2,000 armed American soldiers using just one single combat technique on an isolated island during the Second World War. Meanwhile, his terrifying father holds the ultimate title of the strongest creature in human history. his older brother is a ridiculously intimidating martial artist hailing straight from Canada. Every single one of them shares the exact same cursed trait, the demonic Hanma. Bloodline furiously pumping through their absolute veins, granting them unbelievably broken advantages in any form of brutal physical combat imaginable. He is essentially protected by massive plot armor just like Luffy. I dare any fool to touch my family. Moving to 9. Baki once desperately forced himself to eat until he literally threw up completely, but honestly, puking did not stop his insane momentum at all. He aggressively kept devouring food without a single break, simply because a colossal old master told him that consuming massive calories would eventually burn, and magically transform straight into pure muscle mass, obviously. Deeply combining that extreme diet with an absolutely hellish daily physical conditioning routine, such as running, while carrying giant boulders, climbing massive mountains, punching solid tree trunks, and diving down brutal waterfalls, and the muscles definitely arrived, making him incredibly buffed. 10. Baki absolutely never strikes first against any random opponent whose power scaling is lower than his own, and he genuinely avoids inflicting permanent damage on any weak street thugs trying to randomly gank him. But this surprisingly calm and peaceful attitude completely excludes the 13-year-old version of Baki. Back then, he was acting exactly like an utterly reckless and highly aggressive street punk, constantly hunting for completely random people to violently beat down, just to forcefully prove his own worth. This highly arrogant and chaotic mindset existed, mainly because he desperately wanted to perfectly mirror his insanely ruthless father. However, this extremely dark phase only truly lasted for a very short period. After that brief edgy phase ended, Baki quickly reverted back to being a genuinely cheerful and relaxed individual completely, even though he still desperately wanted to surpass his father. 11. Beyond his insane muscle mass, Baki can seemingly fully control his own skeletal joints and manipulate his blood vessels perfectly while serving his sentence at the Arizona prison. He had 2 of his fingers brutally locked behind his back during his fierce battle with Oliva, so he casually dislocated his own shoulder blades to bring his arms back to normal, popped the joints back in, and used his back muscles to forcefully squeeze his biceps, completely stopping blood flow to his hands, making his thumbs physically shrink much smaller than usual, allowing him to easily escape the finger lock, which is absolutely magical. 12. Baki firmly believes that heavily interacting with completely overpowered opponents grants him incredibly astonishing strength enhancements, and by interacting we mean aggressively brawling with each other obviously, but his terrifying father thinks entirely differently. Yujiro genuinely believes that you must ruthlessly crush absolutely everyone without a single drop of mercy, to truly obtain absolute god-tier power. 13. Baki officially entered his very first underground death match at the Tokyo Underground Dome when he was merely 15, and he ruthlessly climbed straight to the Ultimate Championship without losing once, which is insane because this brutal arena has barely any fighting rules, filled entirely with incredibly bloodthirsty and absolutely lethal challenges. If you lose, those monsters will literally cripple you permanently before sending you back. 14. His academic intelligence might be somewhat low, but his pure martial arts fight IQ is absolutely maxed out to the extreme limit, making him a warrior, highly resourceful and adaptable in any deadly situation. He effortlessly utilizes multiple combat styles simultaneously, smoothly selecting the most perfectly suited technique when furiously engaging against his overpowered rivals. He expertly knows exactly how to temporarily blind his enemies using his own spilled blood. He fully understands the devastating concussion effect of violently shaking someone's brain with a perfectly aimed chin strike, alongside countless other brutal, broken mechanics in pure combat. 15. Baki is so insanely overpowered that he can actively imagine and physically interact with an imaginary beast or a powerful human to a terrifying degree, forcefully creating a completely new and highly lethal combat technique, even when his targets are not actually standing right there. The most mind-blowing part is that random bystanders can clearly witness this terrifyingly realistic projection. This completely broken ability is widely known as shadow fighting. It can even perfectly simulate the exact deadly combat mechanics of his monstrous opponents, ending up getting brutally smashed by his own shadow illusion, bleeding heavily from his face, which is absolute peak madness. 16. You might wonder why Baki continuously grinds his training without ever feeling massively fatigued. It is entirely because he constantly keeps himself in an absolute state of natural euphoria. A highly experienced master once taught him that excessively pushing his physical body will eventually make him hit a solid wall called his ultimate limit, but that specific limitation is simply an illusion created by his own brain, making him believe that pushing further is incredibly dangerous, so it generates immense agonizing pain to force his body to completely halt and avoid physical destruction. But if he aggressively ignores that exact warning, something absolutely magical will rapidly occur. The terrifying agony naturally transforms into a powerful euphoric rush, fueled entirely by pure endorphins released directly from his brain chemistry. It acts as the absolute strongest natural stimulant known to humanity, and many elite fighters strongly claim it hits 1,000 times harder than medical morphine. Therefore, during his hellish training, Baki always intentionally shatters his own mortal limits, completely pushing past reality. Following that, his brain massively floods his system with this natural chemical, instantly trapping Baki straight inside a completely euphoric state where his destructive power becomes basically unlimited. Just a quick reminder that this is purely canon manga fiction, so please do not try to recklessly copy this insane method, or you will end up completely brain damaged instead. 17. Baki is deeply attached and incredibly devoted to his lovely girlfriend Koju. He instantly turns wildly ferocious if she is even slightly threatened. Moving into the second major arc of the manga, he becomes even more deeply connected to his beloved partner, who continuously served as a massive source of his raw emotional power, largely thanks to her endless love and incredibly strong mental support during battles. However, as the canon storyline progressed, probably due to their lack of screen time together, their connection slowly became quite noticeably faded. Things got blurry when Mohamed Alari Jr. desperately attempted to steal Koju's affection, instantly turning this messy situation into a highly complicated, three-way romantic conflict. 18. Baki's ultimate objective is heavily focused on decisively surpassing his god-tier father. He once stated that if his old man was actually the absolute weakest human, he would simply strive to become the second weakest guy alive, just to surpass him perfectly. It seriously seems like he does not care about global power rankings compared to other random fighters. However, when Yujiro finally officially acknowledged him as the absolute strongest boy in the entire world, Baki surprisingly felt an intense wave of complete isolation and pure boredom. It was exactly like standing at the peak with absolutely nothing left to conquer anymore. Continuously accepting deadly challenges from other completely broken monsters became his only way to forcefully relieve his overwhelming boredom and thoroughly feel like he actually had a genuine mortal connection to this world again. 19. Baki was originally born and raised inside a ridiculously wealthy and extremely luxurious family setup until he hit age 13. This is probably exactly why, apart from the times when he is brutally brawling while heavily soaked in pure blood, he acts surprisingly incredibly polite and well-mannered when dealing directly with completely ordinary people, despite his highly refined daily attitude. Whenever he steps into a deadly match, he deeply enjoys aggressively provoking his overpowered opponents to force them to unleash their absolute maximum stats. 20. At exactly age 13, Baki decisively traveled to the treacherous Yasha Ape domain to ruthlessly train in the deep wilderness, simply because his legendary father previously established his dominance by utterly defeating that highly invincible giant beast right there. To surpass his monstrous father, he attempted this insanely reckless and completely stupid, suicidal action. Getting aggressively cursed out by a massive grumpy old man, the veteran desperately tried forcing him to wield a heavy axe, but Baki stubbornly refused to use any weapons whatsoever. Eventually, the terrifying giant ape rapidly ambushed and ruthlessly attacked Baki without mercy. The old master rushed in to save him because the beast was completely destroying Baki. Left with absolutely zero options, he deployed a highly advanced survival tactic by literally setting the giant ape on blazing fire, forcing it to desperately flee for its life. Much later on, Baki totally defeated the legendary beast and surprisingly forged an unbreakable brotherly bond with it. 21. He is insanely famous in his hometown as the absolute most terrifying street brawler alive. That is totally right. This highly aggressive madman brutally defeated every single powerful thug he randomly locked eyes with or actively hunted down. The local gangs were intensely furious but totally outclassed, since they could not physically scratch his immense plot armor. They completely decided to massively torture his mental state by cowardly vandalizing his entire house with graffiti while he was away, because if he was actually home, he would have instantly obliterated their faces. Fact 22. Baki's highly complicated relationship with his terrifying father is incredibly ambiguous and deeply tragic. Baki almost entirely speaks about the old man, with heavy reluctance and pure burning rage. Even though they share the same bloodline, Baki openly fully acknowledges that his monstrous father is undeniably the single strongest entity in the entire world. When completely describing his god-tier power, Baki does not display any petty contempt or raw anger, but rather mixes it with a slight hint of genuine pride. He is also absolutely never indifferent or emotionally numb toward anything his father casually states. The two completely share an incredibly toxic dynamic, exactly like absolute sworn enemies bound by destiny. However, when the deadly situation heavily demands it, they can effortlessly transform into an incredibly overpowered tag team. 23. Baki successfully managed to physically manifest the terrifying demon back during his brutal bloody clash against his massive older brother, but only for an incredibly brief fleeting moment. It heavily buffed his raw combat stats, acting exactly like the powerful Demon Slayer mark in Kimetsu. The legendary demon back is absolutely not a learnable fighting technique, but rather a completely predetermined, highly broken biological advantage tied directly to the cursed Hanma bloodline. 24. Baki showed completely zero initial interest in the prehistoric caveman Pickle, claiming firmly that nobody should aggressively battle the ancient guy because he is a highly endangered prehistoric specimen, and beating him would completely ruin their reputation. Yet somehow, for completely unknown reasons, he eventually actively hunted down the primitive powerhouse just to ruthlessly trade deadly blows. Honestly speaking, Baki strongly believed that fiercely crushing that poor ancient beast was the absolute only way to heavily buff his stats beyond his father. 25. Baki pure combat aura is so insanely broken that he can successfully project a massive terrifying dinosaur illusion, using his own physical stance just to completely intimidate the primitive wildman Pickle. That completely unhinged savage fighter instantly became highly terrified, for real, and started fighting back with absolute chaotic madness. Even the casual spectators sitting high up in the grandstands could vaguely feel the overwhelming physical pressure and massive presence of that projected dinosaur aura. 26. Since his early childhood days, his body has consistently endured the most extremely hellish physical conditioning, granting him incredibly flexible and ridiculously durable muscle fibers beyond normal human limits, followed closely by a completely non-stop brutal fighting schedule, drastically pushing his biological structure way beyond the absolute peak of any standard, ordinary teenager alive. His heavily reinforced skeletal framework and massive muscle density are constantly described as being vastly superior and way more buffed than an elite Olympic athlete, totally capable of successfully tanking literal bullets. Honestly, modern firearms are still a completely broken martial art. Fact 27. Not only does he briefly unlock the legendary demon back in fleeting crucial moments, Baki surprisingly also possesses the terrifying demon brain structure. It is highly likely that this biological anomaly heavily stimulates his intense insatiable thirst for extreme, brutal combat. We honestly do not know if his entire bloodline completely shares this exact same demonic brain feature or not.